Hi, I'm Michael Casper, and here's my dad, and we had just went to the Holy Lands here from January 9th to the 16th, and we had a wonderful time. It was spectacular, a great adventure, and we wanted to let you know that we recognize that a number of you have encouraged us along our way and with our story. So we're here to share that with you. Our Holy Land group of 32 pilgrims were quite ecumenical. Since Rocky River United Methodist hosted this pilgrimage, many of the group were Methodist, also Roman Catholic, United Church of Christ, and other Christian denominations. My special Dan Bogery and Reverend Paul Bennett shepherded this trip, and we just want to let you know we had a great time and safety was not an issue.
Hi, I am John Casper. Now, how did this Holy Land trip come to be? Well, my wife Debbie saw the Holy Land brochure at Rocky River United Methodist Church Sanctuary. And Debbie, as Debbie usually is, had a strong intuitive feeling that this trip would be a great fit for Michael and me. This was April of 2019. I gave this considerable thought, realized that this trip was a trip of a lifetime, and I signed up, the two of us. When both of our churches, Rocky River United Methodist Church and Lakewood Congregational Church, had Bible study programs that fall, which was later in September of 2019, Michael and I both felt that this trip was meant to be. We could learn more about Jesus before this fabulous trip.
Mom and Dad came to Rocky River United Methodist Church to see me play bass guitar in the praise band. I have been playing bass for the band for the last 3 years. There are many wonderful people there. Mom and Dad have come to hear me play at least 2 Sundays every month. The Holy Land trip was wonderful but very demanding. We had to get up at 5:30 to get showered and dressed, then go to a delicious buffet of various ethnic dishes or American dishes to start and end each day. I really looked forward to these choices. Now hurry up and get on that bus on time by 7:30 sharp.
Our daily schedule was quite ambitious. Usually we saw sights for 5 hours before lunch, then we ate, and then another 5 hours of more sightseeing. It required a lot of energy, but all 32 pilgrims on our bus were energized with what we saw and what we heard. What you are about to see is a presentation broken into 3 parts. The first part is about the Israeli culture and history. The second part is about the life of Jesus from his birth to his death. And the third and last part devotes itself to the Beatitudes. We see those loving words of Jesus, and hopefully each of us can implement an action plan for ourselves. And now, from the Corona-free Casper's Believe Land studio, we present for your viewing and listening pleasure, following the footsteps of Jesus.
Here we are in Zurich, Switzerland, awaiting our flight to Tel Aviv. There is a group of Orthodox known as Hasidic Jews who are praying wearing tefillin, which are the 2 small boxes with black straps attached to them. These Orthodox Jews are shuckling, which is the swaying they do while they are praying. Dad and I think that this is a symbolic message that we are on our trip to the Holy Land as we shuckle in our seats. Israel, here we come. It's a rainy first day. This is as good a view as we can get. We are now near the valley of Elah, where David met and killed a Philistine named Goliath. This Canaanite gate became the gate of Abraham when he traveled to rescue his nephew Lot. Canaan was the grandson of Noah and the father of the Canaanites. A tell is an archaeological find uncovered that attests to the city planning with gates, walls, temples, and water systems. Farmers lived and worked near the city. This is the Tel Dan. It is also a beautiful nature preserve whose location is near the Lebanon border. Israel had a military skirmish here as late as 2010. The Tel Dan is the tip of the Promised Land. Caesarea Philippi. Here the god Pan was honored with sacrifices in the bottomless pool of water. These sacrifices were given as appreciation of the abundance of water. Caesarea Philippi was the location Jesus chose to reveal to his disciples that he was the Messiah. Also, Jesus announced his coming death and the end of his ministry. The Hazar Tel is one of the oldest archaeological sites in Israel. Here Joshua fought against Jabin, and later Hazar was fortified by Solomon. Tel Megiddo, established in 7000 BCE, is an archaeological dig with layers of 26 different cities, all built on top of each other. Megiddo is known for its historical and theological importance, especially under its Greek name of Armageddon. Numerous battles have occurred here. The site I am pointing to is prophesied to be the location for the apocalyptic battle between good and evil. Here at Mount Carmel is a statue symbolizing where Elijah defeated the prophets of Baal. Caesarea was the center of early Christians. It was here that Cornelius became the first Gentile convert to the new religion of Christianity. Paul was imprisoned here before he was taken to Rome for trial. Jericho is one of the earliest continuous settlements in the world, dating over 10,000 years ago. This city, Bethshean, has been continuously inhabited for over 5,000 years. In the battle of the Israelites against the Philistines on Mount Gilboa, the bodies of King Saul and his 3 sons were hung on the walls of Bethshean. The ruins uncovered date back to the Greek-Roman city that was part of the Decapolis of Jesus' day, with its colonnaded streets with marbled sidewalks and its public baths. Jerusalem had been known as the City of David for more than 3,000 years. God continued to keep the memory of David, his faithful servant, alive for many generations. The stone structure that supported David's palace was the support wall of the stronghold of Zion. The Dead Sea Scrolls refer to ancient Hebrew scrolls. They were accidentally discovered in 1947 by a Bedouin boy outside of the Qumran caves. Since the discovery was near the Dead Sea, this is the same name attached to the find. A reason for their significance is that they support the truthfulness of the Bible. In the Bible, there are over 40 authors who wrote 66 books in 3 languages, yet the margin of error was less than 1%. Most of these errors consist of differences in spelling and punctuation. Magdala is believed to be the birthplace of Mary Magdalene. In 2009, Magdala became a reality because of the discovery of a first-century synagogue where Jesus probably preached. Mary Magdalene witnessed the mock trial of Jesus, heard Pontius Pilate announce the death sentence, saw Jesus beaten and humiliated by the crowd, stood at the crucifixion to comfort Jesus, was the earliest witness to the resurrection at the tomb, and probably was the woman present with the apostles for the coming of the Holy Spirit on Pentecost. So come along and join us. We've got you covered. By the way, mandatory military service in Israel begins at age 18. For men, 3 years of service, and unmarried women, with a couple of exceptions, must serve 2 years. So let's cross over the Jordan River, or go for a hike through the lush Israeli preserve, or choose your favorite camel like we did and hop on as we follow the footsteps of Jesus. Let's start at the beginning with the announcement of the birth of Jesus at Shepherd's Field. Located at the outskirts of Bethlehem, this traditional place of the angel's visit is in the town of Beit Seor. The traditional site of Shepherd's Field is complicated by the fact that archaeologists have identified more than one possible site. The chapel marks the place where the angels first announced the birth of Christ. The Church of the Nativity is a basilica located in Bethlehem on the site of the cave where Jesus was born. Yes, Jesus was born in a cave. Entering the grotto that marks the site of Christ's birthplace means having to stoop low through a tight opening. Under the altar of the Nativity is the exact spot where Jesus was born, marked by a 14-pointed silver star. Just a few feet away is the crib where Jesus was placed. This is so incredible. Jesus was born here. Now we will follow the footsteps of 30-year-old Jesus. Jesus came to Capernaum after the confrontations he had in the Nazarene synagogue. Capernaum was the center of Jesus' ministry, and the synagogue here is where Jesus taught. Capernaum is the location of the healing of the paralytic lowered by friends through the roof to reach Jesus. It also is the place where Jesus healed a Roman centurion's servant who asked for his help. Shown here is the statue of Peter, who is considered to be the first pope for the Catholic Church. On Sunday, January 12th, 2020, Christian churches all over the world were listening to a sermon about the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist. Dad and I felt privileged and blessed to be rebaptized in the Jordan River on this very special day. It was a day we both will never forget and will relive for the rest of our lives. After being baptized, Jesus fasted for 40 days and nights in the Judean desert. Pictured here is the traditional site of the temptation of Jesus, shown with the Mount of Temptation, Greek Orthodox monastery. Satan said, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, and the angels will save you." This is Bethsaida, where Jesus chose 5 of his disciples. The 12 disciples were men of ordinary means, predominantly fishermen, a tax collector, a zealot, and a thief. They experienced much hardship, failings, and doubts following Jesus. After viewing the over 2,000-year-old boat, Dad and I boarded the fishing boat named Hippo. The morning began on this glorious day of January 12, 2020. The boat's name symbolizes the creative power to revitalize things in your life, including your spiritual connections. The Hippo sailed to the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and our fishing boat was connected with 3 other boats. Our group of 350 worshiped this Sunday with a moving 1-hour service of stirring music and 3 wonderful sermons. There were moments of complete silence where I could hear a pin drop that took our breath away. Time out for lunch. My dad had St. Peter's fish and I had pasta. With our crowd of 350 pilgrims gathered along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, there was a ceremony for the renewal of marriage vows. We really felt Jesus' ministry here. Wow. January 12th, 2020 was truly the most spiritual experience my father has ever had. Walking through the Valley of the Doves, my dad and I felt the presence and the peacefulness of Jesus. This 22-mile route was a major pathway that Jesus walked 3 times a year when he had to travel from Capernaum to Jerusalem. Silently, we named this special path the Gospel Trail. The southern steps were steps that led to the double gate of the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount has historical and religious significance for all 3 of the major Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The second temple was built here and destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. Jewish tradition maintains that it is here that a third and final temple will be built. The Temple Mount has been controlled by Israel since 1967. It remains a major focal point of the Arab-Israeli conflict. This is the place where Abraham proved his faith in God by his willingness to sacrifice Isaac. The Western Wall is a surviving remnant of the Temple Mount. When the temple stood, the world was filled with the awe of God. Every day, the Wailing Wall is visited by pilgrims. Men wishing to enter the prayer section of the wall are required to wear either a Jewish skull cap called a yarmulke or a kippah. Each composes a prayer and leaves a note with their wishes inside the wall's cracks. Going to the Western Wall was inspiring to see the devoted prayer of the Jews there. Jesus entered Jericho on his final trip to Jerusalem, and Zacharias, the wealthy tax collector, wanted to see him. Because he was short, Zacharias climbed a sycamore fig tree, like this one, to see Jesus. In the temple at Nazareth, neighbors who had heard stories of Jesus' powerful works came to see him. They thought that his healing should have started at home and felt slighted. These neighbors got angry and they chased Jesus to the top of Mount Precipice and tried to throw him off the 1,300-foot top. On Palm Sunday, Jesus went down the Mount of Olives on his entry to Jerusalem. Halfway down the mount is the church of Dominus Flevit, which means the little teardrop. This was the place Jesus wept over Jerusalem's future destruction, along with its temple. Jesus spent significant time teaching and making prophecies. The Mount of Olives was the site of many events in the Bible and has a 3,000-year-old Jewish cemetery which holds up to 150,000 graves. This is the place where Jesus ascended into heaven. Located on an upper floor of King David's tomb is a room called the Cenacle. It is the room of the Last Supper where Jesus shared with his disciples their final meal. The Cenacle was the first Christian church. Jesus and his disciples left the Cenacle and went to the Garden of Gethsemane. Here Jesus prayed on the night of his betrayal. His despair was so deep that he sweats drops of blood. Then he was arrested by the Roman soldiers. Jesus was taken to the palace home of Caiaphas. Caiaphas was a Jewish high priest and was a strong opponent of Jesus and his message. Caiaphas organized the plot against Jesus using the rabbis, scribes, and the elders to make their case against Jesus. The flagellation of Christ is sometimes known as the scourging at the pillar. Roman soldiers whipped Jesus with a thorny stick covered with knots and splinters. They tore his flesh to pieces. Then Pontius Pilate ordered Jesus to death on a cross. The stations, or the way of the cross, are a series of images depicting Jesus on the day of his crucifixion and accompanying prayers. The Via Dolorosa is believed to be the actual path Jesus walked to Mount Calvary. In churches, the stations grew out of an imitation of Via Dolorosa so people could go on a spiritual journey with the 5 stages of death: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. The soldiers took Jesus to Mount Calvary. It is also known as Golgotha, to be crucified. Most scholars choose the Church of the Holy Sepulchre as the hill of execution. It was located outside of Jerusalem's walls. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre contains the 2 holiest Christian sites. The first site is where Jesus was crucified. That site is both known as Golgotha and the place of the skull. The second holiest site is Jesus' empty tomb. Back in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I am kneeling at the Greek Orthodox chapel's altar. This is placed over the rock of Calvary, which can be touched through a hole in the floor. My dad is touching the stone of anointing, where Jesus' body is said to have been anointed before his burial. The garden tomb belonged to Joseph of Arimathea, who was virtuous and rich and gained Pontius Pilate's permission to obtain Jesus' body. It is a rock-cut tomb located 100 yards from Golgotha in a setting of neatly maintained gardens and trees. The garden tomb provides a tranquil environment for prayer of reflection. Our group of 350 glorified Christ's resurrection with the celebration of communion. We ate bread symbolizing Jesus' body and grape juice as a symbol for his blood. We took time to reflect on Jesus' sacrificial love. The Church of the Beatitudes is on a small hill overlooking the Sea of Galilee. Built for a Franciscan order of nuns, the Church of the Beatitudes cares not only for its congregational members, but the homeless and the less fortunate. It is located on the spot where Jesus taught his followers, including the Sermon on the Mount. And now a reading of the 8 Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The family that hosted us was the Azar family: George, Najla, and Tony, their son. George is a bus driver, Najla hosts Airbnb, and Tony is an accountant. Tony and his family live in Dublin, and as luck would have it, Tony made a surprise visit to see his parents during our visit. We were treated to a homemade meal and enjoyed learning about their lives in Bethlehem. We were shocked to find out that there are only 10% of Christians in Palestine today, compared to 70% 50 years ago.
Yay!
Yay! We did it!
We sure did.
Thank you for being here with us on this amazing spiritual Holy Land journey.
Each of us will reflect on the question, how did this trip impact my own life? When I came back from the Holy Land trip, I proclaimed I was transformed. I wanted to live a Christian life in every single moment of living. Then I started making this Jesus presentation, and this really opened my eyes about myself. This creation had so many glitches, editing problems, script issues, theme questions, and lots of drama. There were a number of tense moments frustration, anxiety, doubt. I was crabby and irritable. I focused too much on the faults. This Jesus production was so much like real life, the messy and uncomfortable parts of life. Stop it, John. Being Christian doesn't mean that I am perfect. I prayed and then extra prayed during these times for a peaceful mind. Praying helped bring out the best that I could soulfully be. Thank you, sweet Jesus, for your forgiveness and your unconditional love.
In summary, we had so many experiences on this great trip, it truly was overwhelming. The pilgrimage to Israel with Rocky River United Methodist Church has reminded me of God's influence on my life. It has caused me to reflect on who God is and his virtues. Here are some of his virtues through Scripture. Grace, Ephesians 2, 8 through 9. For it is by grace you have been saved. It is a gift from God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Compassion and forgiveness, Luke 23:34. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Peace, Philippians 4:7. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Jesus Christ. And love, Ephesians 5:1. Be imitators of God, therefore, as deeply loved children, and live a life of love, just as Christ loved us. And also love, 1 Corinthians 13:13. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest is love. This trip was an incredible once-in-a-lifetime experience. There were so many amazing people in our group, from the bus drivers and tour guides to everybody else. And I cannot thank you enough for all that you did for us. Thank you to Dan and Paul at Rocky River United Methodist Church and all the church denominations and people we met. This was our first trip to the Holy Lands. I highly recommend this trip. It truly will transform your life. You will never look at the Bible the same way. I would be glad to connect you with someone for the next trip. And the closing, Thessalonians 5:11, therefore encourage one another and build one another up. And this is exactly what our group did on this trip. Thank you.